All right, why don't we get started? We want to be sure to respect everyone's time. Thank you all for joining us on the very first in the nation Rare Disease Day event hosted by NORD. My name is Mike Hu. I serve as the volunteer state ambassador for California's Rare Action Network, which is a organization run by NORD for state work. And I'll give you a very brief introduction of myself. I'm a scientist, and I have 3 boys, 2 of whom were diagnosed with a rare genetic disease called mucopolysaccharidosis type 2 in 2011, which is why I started to hang out with the rare disease folks in the community. It's been close to 10 years now since I started my advocacy work, and this is my 2nd year serving with the NORD state ambassador role. So thank you very much for joining. Together we have Earl Cole, my co-ambassador. Earl.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, my name is Earl Cole. I am the other California state ambassador for NORD. I've been serving in this position, I guess going on 3 years, might be around there. It goes by very quickly because it's so much fun. And I was originally diagnosed with Legg-Calvé-Perthes disease, which is a rare hip bone disease. I was diagnosed at the age of 6. So I've been dealing with the rare disease community for quite some time. I'm also the founder of the Perthes Kids Foundation, which is one of NORD's advocacy group member organizations. So I guess I'm a patient and an organizational member as well as an ambassador. So happy to be here and glad everyone is joining us for this special event.
And we're very happy to have all of you joining us, and we have invited a few great speakers who will share their stories with us from different perspectives. We'll introduce them when the time comes up. First of all, I want to give you an overview of the agenda, as you can see here on the slide. And one little side note, which was I guess a pleasant surprise for me, as I learned yesterday, that we have a door prize for joining the event. Kristen Angel, our NORD staff on the call, will help us do the drawing probably 15 minutes into the meeting, and then we'll announce the winner at the end. I think we'll have pretty much a full hour-and-a-half agenda, so stay tuned until the very end for the details on that. Now, without further ado, I'll turn it to Alice, our West Regional Manager for Policy Work at NORD.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to go ahead and kick off today with 2 videos, and then we'll dive into our presentation. So bear with me real quick as I get that video to play.
I am Tristan.
Angelina.
Nama saya Syafiq.
Regina.
Habari asubuhi, Javi.
Jeg er Christian og jeg bor i Norge.
I live in the United States of America.
In Australia.
Malaysia.
No Brasil.
Tunaishi Kenya.
My passion is for fashion and design.
I love to dance.
Menyusur hutan.
Para viajar e descobrir novas kulturas.
Anapenda kunitazama nikipuliza mapovu.
Jeg elsker idrett og spiller spill med familien min. Minhas paixões são minha fuga quando as coisas estão difíceis.
Ada hari-harinya apabila melakukan perkara yang biasa akan jadi sangat susah.
When your disease makes you feel isolated.
It's difficult to walk.
Og være med på laget.
When I'm tired.
Afraid.
O controle da doença pode ser desafiador.
Atau mengecewakan bila saya kehilangan masa.
Muda muhimu sana.
But we learned to be resilient.
Para apreciar os pequenos detalhes que me trazem alegria.
Kumuona mtoto wangu wa kiume anavyofurahi tunapoenda nje. Nikijua anasikiza hadithi na sauti zilizo karibu.
Mencari titik hubungan dengan masyarakat yang tak pernah saya sedar wujud.
Å være uavhengig på grunn av menneskene rundt meg.
There is support.
Sua bondade inabalável.
The big grilla.
Mine venner.
Keluarga.
Enfermeiras.
Doctor. doctors,
support workers.
assistenter, mashirika ya wagonjwa.
Together, we are a strong community.
Nimeweza kuelekewa.
Histórias compartilhadas que me libertaram das dúvidas.
Oh, kama seltelet.
I am Tristan. I live with sickle cell.
I'm Angelina.
And she has CASC, a neurological disorder. Saya Syafiq dan saya hidup dengan ectodermal dysplasia.
Regina, eu tinha leiomiosarcoma, câncer raro.
Huyu ni Harvey. Ana SMA, spinal muscular atrophy. يمكن سيام حياي حرقوي. ما فبتر شعرات.
Esta é minha vida.
Suara saya.
And I am more than my disease.
We are rare.
Kami ramai.
Nós somos fortes.
And we are proud.
All right, and then we have one more quick video to share with you all, a welcome message from our CEO at the National Organization for Rare Disorders.
Welcome. I'm Peter Saltonstall, President and CEO of the National Organization for Rare Disorders, and would like to welcome you to our 2021 Virtual Rare Disease Day event. Before we begin, I'd like to send out a special thank you to all those advocates and others who have spent so much energy and time supporting the rare disease community. So thank you. The role of Rare Disease Day is to bring together advocates and patients from around the world to help tell the story about rare diseases. There are events like this happening virtually all over this country today. And some of the audiences that we're really trying to focus on are those in the state legislatures, where advocates and legislative people come together to understand the burden of rare diseases and the impacts it can have on them, and therefore build the appropriate legislation and pathway to make sure that bills are passed that support rare disease patients. As a matter of fact, NORD's doing that in a very focused way with rare disease advisory councils. We've got them set up down in 16 states and are building them in others. I think 2021 is going to be an interesting year for us. The reason I say that is because we've just come off of a very difficult year with a pandemic that's impacted the rare disease community in a number of different ways and has really shown some of the inequities in the healthcare system. For all of you that are watching today, the importance of the rare disease advisory councils is critical to the success of being able to communicate the story and the needs of the rare disease patient community. So in conclusion, I would really like to make sure that I recognize and thank all of those sponsors who have helped us make this day a reality. Without your continued support, none of this would happen. So a sincere thank you from all of us at NORD and the patient community. Taking part in events like today's are really important to the rare disease community. And we must always remember that alone we are rare and together we are strong.
All right, thank you everyone for watching those videos with us. I'm gonna go ahead and get our PowerPoint going again real quick.
And Liz, just a very quick interruption. I wanted to make sure everyone knows that the event is being recorded. We definitely want the event to be viewable to all of the additional advocates who cannot make it to today's meeting. So that being said, if you have any questions or feel uncomfortable, please feel free to omit your name or turn off your video or what have you. So without further ado, Alice.
Thank you. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Elise Patel, and I'm our Western Region State Policy Manager for NORD, and we're excited to be here today to talk about NORD's Rare Disease Advisory Council work and share why RDAC started and where we're headed this year. And as many of you know, 25 to 30 million Americans are impacted by a rare disease, which breaks down to about 1 in 10 individuals. And while that is quite a few people that are directly impacted, what we're finding is that many lawmakers aren't necessarily aware of those unique challenges faced by the rare disease community. And so the solution was to form a rare disease advisory council or councils where diverse groups of those from the rare disease community could really come together and advise state government. And this is especially important because we know that many of our healthcare decisions are actually made at the state level. And we see this as an enormous opportunity for both the community and legislators to come together and partner in a more strategic way to address the issues on a regular basis. The first council was created in 2015 by some fantastic advocates in North Carolina, and since then has really gained some traction across the country. So there are currently 16 states that have passed RDAC legislation, with Massachusetts being the last state to do so just a few months ago. And much of the progress that, as you can see, has happened over the last 2 years, with 10 governors signing RDAC legislation into law since 2019. So NORD has launched what we call Project RDAC in the past year as a way to help optimize the existing RDACs and to increase the number of RDACs across the country. Under this initiative, NORD will be providing opportunities for RDACs to collaborate with each other, as well as provide educational resources to guide the RDACs for every step of the journey. And we welcome you to visit our website, rarediseases.org. You can see it here on the bottom of the slide, and click on the Project RDAC tab. There you will actually find several resources, our upcoming events, and an interactive state map where you can actually view the California specific information, including our brand new California one-pager. And we're also pleased to share that Senate Bill 247 was introduced by Senator Susan Eggman, and you're going to hear more about that bill later in our presentation. But briefly, SB 247 will establish an RDAC as well as a rare disease ombudsperson and the California Health and Human Services Agency, help coordinate statewide efforts to help study the incidence of rare disease. They will act as an advisory body to the legislature and state departments, and serve as an expert advisory committee to the Medi-Cal Drug Use Review Board. And we're really proud to have a robust and strong, diverse coalition of over 60 members helping in this effort. And we even have some engagement opportunities coming up that you're going to hear more about from Siri towards the end of our program. So now I'd like to briefly go over our NORD state report card. This is our 6th year publishing the state report card. And the report card is a tool to evaluate how effective states are at serving the rare disease community. We track individual state progress on priority policy issues, as seen on this slide, and enable effective advocacy by providing a tangible tool to see how your state measures up in key areas. The issues outlined touch on several critical and relevant policy areas. However, we do recognize that there are still other policy areas that impact the lives of rare disease patients. And this year we transitioned the report to a new interactive digital format. So there's a state report card landing page, as well as a web page for each of the 8 issues that are highlighted in the report. So feel free to use the link provided on the slide to see how California is measuring up. And then finally, I wanted to share a little bit on the methodology of the state report card. So all of the data that you will see on this report is data as of November 2020, with the exception of the Rare Disease Advisory Councils. We've updated the RDACs through December of 2020 to reflect the exciting passage of RDACs in Ohio and Massachusetts that happened at the end of the year. Any current bills that are currently in the state legislature or bills that may have already passed in the beginning of 2020 were not factored into this report card or grade. And then each issue has its own appendix that we derive the overall grade from, and individual issue pages that contain a grading methodology section where you can read more about how each of the issues was evaluated. And with that, I welcome you to reach out to our policy team with any questions related to the RDAC efforts or state report card, and you can reach us by emailing policy@rarediseases.org. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Earl, who's going to introduce our next speaker. Thank you, everyone. And Earl, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, thank you for that. Our first guest speaker will be Miss Christy Ouimet, and she's gonna give you a little talk today. So Christy, take it away.
Thank you so much. My name is Christy Ouimet, and my family and I live in Antioch, California. My 18-year-old daughter, Molly, and my 10-year-old son, Matthew, have a very rare and potentially fatal genetic disease called primary hyperoxaluria type 1. It affects approximately 1 in a million people, and there is no cure. Molly has been suffering from painful kidney stones since she was 3 years old. We did not know what was causing these until she was finally diagnosed when she was 6. The only form of treatment we had was to increase her water intake and get labs and ultrasound of her abdomen every 6 months and meet with her nephrologist. If she had symptoms of passing a stone, it would be addressed at that time. She has passed many stones over the years, some so large they needed to be surgically removed. When I was pregnant with Matthew, it was confirmed he also had PH1. We were told to watch him closely in case he passed a stone and follow up when he was 6 months old. Even with several specialists monitoring his health, we almost lost him. Matthew went into end-stage renal failure at 5 months old and had to be rushed to UCSF Children's Hospital in San Francisco. He spent weeks in the hospital and had a hemodialysis catheter placed in his chest to clean his blood of toxins and oxalate. We were discharged to begin our treatment in the outpatient pediatric facility in San Francisco, 50 miles away. Matthew was listed on the transplant waiting list for a liver and kidney. He had a G-tube placed to give him medication and nutrition. He also had a peritoneal dialysis catheter placed in his belly so that fluid would stretch his abdomen to make it large enough to receive adult-sized transplanted organs. Our family had to endure a very challenging schedule. My older 2 children moved in with my parents, and my focus was on Matthew's care. Since I was nursing Matthew, I needed to be with him at all times. Every day, I woke up at 3:30 a.m. and traveled to San Francisco for hemodialysis, returning around 3 p.m. We spent time with his siblings at their grandparents' house before heading home to see my husband before he had to go off to work the night shift. I would get Matthew to sleep by 8 p.m. and then begin our nightly peritoneal dialysis process that took 4 hours. Around midnight, I would start his night feeds and go to sleep for 3 hours, only to do it all over again the next day. We did this every day for 2 years. We tried to get assistance for the evening dialysis sessions to allow me time to sleep, but we didn't qualify for any services, and we couldn't afford to pay for any of these services either. Matthew received his kidney and liver transplant when he was 2.5 years old. Due to life-threatening complications, including a stroke, he spent a lot of the next year in the hospital. When we were discharged, we needed to do follow-up therapy to assist in his recovery. Unfortunately, he had a very weakened immune system that made him very susceptible to illnesses that needed to be avoided with any enclosed places with other people, which included most of his therapy in school. We didn't qualify for modified or in-home therapy. His compromised immune system required him to be homeschooled. With little outside help available, we discovered we would have to figure out how to do his therapies at home and just learn as we go. Knowing how unpredictable this disease is, we hoped to save Molly from the same experience Matthew went through. As a mother, it goes against every ounce of my being to just sit and do nothing when my child is in pain or suffering from something that has no treatment or cure. Telling them to hold on to hope while someone else searches for a cure is not good enough, and patience is not my virtue. I had to do something more. We used the connections we made with other families and advocates to educate ourselves on PH and what was being researched for new treatments. We learned that there were clinical trials being talked about starting soon, so we maxed out our credit cards and traveled around the country to meet with specialists in several states to try to get her enrolled into something that would help. Molly's health was getting worse as we waited for these trials to begin. She spent a lot of time in the hospital and out of school. She was passing large kidney stones and every couple of weeks needed more surgery. Our desperation for treatment consumed our lives, and it was a race against time. We needed this medication sooner than it was going to be made available. Molly had to be admitted to have stones removed that were over 1 inch in size. The doctor went through her back to get them, and her kidneys were shutting down. We were 1 month away from finally receiving the study drug when we ran out of time. In February of 2020, we were in Washington, D.C., sharing our story on Capitol Hill and trying to raise awareness for our rare disease when we received a phone call from one of Molly's doctors saying she would need to start dialysis the following week. Her body just could not hold out any longer, waiting for this medication that was always just out of reach. Instead of feeling defeated, Molly continued advocating for 2 more days in Washington, D.C., in hopes that her efforts would help other PH patients who still had time for this to make a difference. Molly started hemodialysis on March 2nd, 2020. She, like her brother, has to commute to San Francisco for outpatient dialysis. We continue to push for treatment options, and in June, we were finally granted the opportunity to get compassionate use of an investigational medication which has helped treat her disease. For the first time, we started to think we may have options for Molly that we didn't have for Matthew. Because of this medication, Molly will be one of the first patients with this disease to receive a kidney-only transplant that should save her liver from ever needing to be transplanted at all. We have so much hope, but we're scared too. We know someone has to be the first. We trust our medical team. We learned that we just really have to push hard for our own course of treatment and advocate every step of the way. For years, we have felt that we have just missed opportunities that were finally made available. But as long as somebody can benefit from all the struggles that we have endured, then it was worth it. Matthew has recently spent a lot of time in the hospital due to transplant-related struggles, and he now needs a new kidney. He is on the transplant waiting list and will most likely begin hemodialysis soon as he waits for his match. We now have 2 children on the transplant waiting list at the same time. As a parent, I am dedicated to my children and helping them get through these challenging times. However, as a member of this community, my desire to help others continues to drive me. We may not have the same diseases, but we have a lot in common. We all share in the confusion, fear, frustration, and isolation of living with a rare disease. When we don't have the answers, we have to find other ways to connect with people who can help us in our journey. We need a rare disease advisory council here in California to help our community to have a voice, but to also have action. We need a council that is made from people who are directly impacted by rare diseases, who knows firsthand the challenges we all face. It is critical that patients, parents, and caregivers are allowed an opportunity to share their story and assist with programs designed to help, because they are the ones who truly have firsthand experience of what it is like to live with rare disease and personal knowledge of what they need while going through it. We know that having the patient voice heard by all who are involved in the medical community can change the perspective on who we are fighting for and why. The services a patient needs should not be determined by anything other than what the patient needs. There has to be accountability for making sure that no one falls through the cracks and struggles with help along the way. When we work together, we can make sure that no one gets left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy, for sharing with us your family story. It is truly an inspiring one. I think as we in the rare disease community could reflect upon, there are many challenges out there. Each of them are unique, but a common theme is we all face challenges one way or another. And it's all too common to hear, you don't qualify for certain things because we haven't seen it before, right? So I think to that end, even though RDAC probably doesn't solve every problem out there, but it's an important step for us towards being able to have a voice and address those problems one by one. So thanks again for sharing with us. Our next speaker will be my friend, Dr. Katie Hoffman. She's a pediatrician, a mother of 2 who added rare disease advocate to her resume after her son, Peter, was diagnosed with the same disease as my kids, mucopolysaccharidosis type 2 or Hunter syndrome in early 2019 at the age of 19 months. Katie is a graduate of UCSF School of Medicine, where she also completed her residency and chief residency in pediatrics. She currently practices as a pediatrician and neonatal hospitalist at Marine Health Medical Center in Marin County. Since January 2020, Katie has also served on the board of directors of Project Alive, a parent-led fundraising, advocacy, and research organization for Hunter syndrome, with the goal of applying her professional skills and personal experience to give Peter and all boys with Hunter syndrome the hope and possibility of a full life. Katie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Mike, for that introduction. You make me sound more qualified than I feel on most days. I really appreciate this opportunity to share a little snapshot of my family's rare disease story. And as Mike said, I'm a practicing pediatrician. I'm a mother of 2 beautiful children, Madeline, who is 6 years old, and Peter, who is 3.5. And I earned my entrance into the Rare Disease Club when Peter was diagnosed with MPS II or Hunter syndrome just about 2 years ago last month. Since I imagine with the thousands of rare diseases out there, many people have never heard of MPS. I just wanted to give a brief introduction to what it is. It's disease in the lysosomal storage disease family caused by a defective gene carried on the X chromosome. It affects almost exclusively boys, although girls can carry the gene usually without symptoms and without awareness, as I was unaware that I was a carrier before Peter's diagnosis. This defective gene leads to a loss of function of a critical enzyme that carries out cellular waste. And so the accumulation of that waste in cells leads to progressive cellular damage in just about every organ system in the body. So the symptoms of the disease progress over time and literally impact everything from the heart, the airways and respiratory system to the joints and bones and muscles. And for about 2/3 of boys with Hunter syndrome, the brain is really severely impacted, leading to progressive cognitive decline after a period of normal development. So it's a really devastating diagnosis that, similar to the last disease we just heard about, has no cure. There is one FDA-approved therapy that is astronomically expensive, requires lifetime weekly IV infusions, and although it can slow progression and palliate symptoms, it does not reach the brain and has no impact on the cognitive effects of the disease. An alternative but less well accepted therapy because of the risks of morbidity and mortality is hematopoietic stem cell transplant, more commonly known as bone marrow transplant. And that essentially replaces the bone marrow of a child with a healthy, continually renewing source of healthy cells that can carry enzyme to other areas of the body and hopefully correct some of the damage. And there's a hope, although not clear data, that there might be an impact on the brain as well. You can go to the next slide, please. So my family's story begins like most Hunter syndrome stories with a very healthy, normal appearing baby. And I am going to torture you with many pictures of my very cute son. He really grew and developed and thrived very normally over the first year of life. And the first time that I realized I had a big advantage in being in the healthcare profession was around a year old, when I recognized that his head was growing far out of proportion with his body. And despite his normal development, really pushed his pediatrician to initiate a little bit of evaluation. For better or worse, that evaluation actually came back reassuring, and there were no big red flags. However, we did watch closely, and over the next few months, it became obvious that something was very wrong. And by 18 months old, his head was continuing to grow quite disproportionately. His speech development had slowed, and I was starting to notice some of the more subtle symptoms of MPS. You can see in some of the photos a little bit of curling of his fingers. He had a chronic runny nose. He had some loose stool, had some ear infections. None of these things seemed abnormal for a child, but put together added up to a diagnosis of MPS. So at about 18 months old, we received the first signs that something was quite wrong when he had an MRI that showed white matter changes, and simultaneously a hearing test that showed bilateral hearing loss. And the second place that I really noted an advantage being in a healthcare profession was when it came to advocating for efficiency in his diagnostic workup. When I was told it would take 6 months to see a geneticist to do the necessary lab tests, I absolutely refused to accept that answer, and was able to use, my healthcare connections and knowledge of the system to expedite a workup that led to a diagnosis within 6 weeks. And that really changed our treatment options and the course of my son's disease, because we were able to start treatment much earlier than many boys who are not diagnosed until they're 3, 4, or even 5 years old. You can go to the next slide. So obviously we were processing kind of the devastation of this diagnosis, and truly as a parent, with lots of tears and many sleepless nights. But I also had the advantage of being able to connect with medical experts, to read the medical literature, and to research any clinical trials or novel therapies that might be out there. Unfortunately, at the time, there were no clinical research trials open for my son, and we didn't feel like accepting weekly enzyme replacement therapy without benefit for his brain. And so we chose the less common path, bone marrow transplant. And although heartbreaking at first to involve my young daughter, who at the time was 4, so intimately in this process, we learned that she was a perfect match and not a carrier for the disease, and she became his bone marrow donor. And through the incredible support of the wonderful child life specialists at the Children's Hospital, we were able to make the experience for her as low trauma as possible. Although this year of transplant was incredibly difficult for our family, common challenges faced by many rare disease families, I'm sure, but a prolonged hospitalization, living in the hospital for over 2 months, followed by over 6 months of extreme immunocompromise, quarantine, isolation, and running a hospital with feeding tubes and multiple immunosuppressants and toxic medications daily for months at a time. We made the very difficult, but at the time, best decision we could to have our daughter live with extended family for a number of months and enjoy extended summer vacations and lots of love while we focused on the caregiving needs of our son. We went through a lot of adjustments to our careers, taking leaves of absence, turning down job opportunities that would provide inferior health insurance benefits and would need to disrupt the care for our son. But we did make it through. And on the next slide, we are now about to celebrate. You can go on to the next slide. Thank you. We're about to celebrate Peter's 2-year transplant anniversary. He is fully and stably engrafted with his sister's bone marrow that makes a low level of enzyme in his body, and does seem to have cleared almost all of the toxic waste that we can measure in urine, which is how we measure it. He is just a loving, joyful, active little boy. And it is not without great hardship and exhaustion still. He is in multiple physical therapies, occupational therapies, speech therapies weekly, attends a special educational program for deaf and hearing impaired children. He wears one type of leg splints a day, another type of leg splints at night. There's a 45-minute daily stretching routine that we go through to help maintain his mobility. So his continued growth, development, mobility does not come at no cost to our family, despite him having successfully survived the bone marrow transplant. And although we are thrilled with how he is doing right now, we are constantly living with the anxiety of what comes next. We know that he is right at the cusp of the typical time period when boys will stop in terms of their cognitive development and start to regress. And we live with a background of anxiety every day, which is what has prompted our family to join a foundation that works on research, advocacy, and fundraising for novel therapies. And we are so thrilled that there are new treatment options for many of these boys. And we hope that Peter will be able to take advantage of moving forward. It's also a reason that I want to continue advocating at the local and national level to just raise awareness and to be able to hopefully share our story in an impactful way. You can go on to the next slide. Just a couple of closing things that I will mention, kind of lessons learned through our journey and in my experience as a pediatrician. And I can honestly say that probably my experience as a rare disease parent just in the past 2 years has influenced my my career as a pediatrician more in that short time than 10 years of being a pediatrician influenced my ability to be a capable rare disease parent. But I think that a few just things that really stick out to me from our journey, although I think my son's diagnosis was relatively early and relatively efficient, I can see how that opened up doors for him in terms of therapy and will influence his outcome. And that is not the case for many boys with Hunter syndrome or for many children with rare disease. And so just the importance of eliminating the diagnostic odyssey, that long delay between initiation or initial symptoms and diagnosis is so critical. And it's why I am such a huge proponent of newborn screening and advocating for additional diseases to be added to our newborn screening. I talk about newborn screening with families every single day at my job in the hospital, and I see every year multiple children whose lives are saved or whose lives are altered because newborn screening allows such early diagnosis. And there just is such an increase in therapeutic options and potential efficacy of treatment when started early. Then the next thing is just the difficulty of managing medical complexity. There's no possible way that a general pediatrician could be an expert in thousands of rare diseases. And I don't think I expected that of our pediatrician, but I didn't anticipate the huge burden placed on family members of coordinating care. And if there could be centralized resources to help families manage this, I not only had the advantage of being a healthcare professional, but also a native English speaker, and not being limited financially in terms of what we could access for care. And I see many other families in my community struggling with that, even more so with rare disease. And then finally, there are various hurdles and challenges in terms of education, in terms of eligibility and access to regional center services, and in terms of receiving medical therapies or other services through California Children's Service. And I don't want to take any additional time, but I am thrilled to be active in this group, and I look forward to seeing where the RDAC goes from here.
Thank you, Katie, for sharing with us another story that really resonates with me personally, of course. And I think all the challenges that we're facing in accessing the resources are really a key for the RDAC to address. Earl?
Yeah, Katie, that was very, very powerful and moving, actually, hearing that. You're an amazing mom and advocate for sure. Next up, we have Dr. Stanley Nelson, professor, vice chairman of human genetics, professor of psychiatry at the David Gevin School of Medicine at UCLA, part of our developing relationship with UCLA Health and their newly formed rare disease division. So we appreciate Dr. Nelson's time. He's going to share a few slides. So do we have to give him some type of access so he can share some slides? He's going to talk about his experience in the rare disease field. Dr. Nelson, are you?
Let me stop sharing my screen real quick. And
okay.
Yeah, I can't quite yet, but let's see. Okay, yeah, I can share now. Let me just do that.
Okay.
Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
So hopefully that looks like a slide, everybody.
That is a slide. Yep.
Very good. All right. So yeah, I'm Stanley Nelson. I'm a professor at UCLA, and I'll walk you through a few reasons why I'm in the rare disease space and introduce you all to the California Center for Rare Diseases, which is a new effort at UCLA, which is intended to be a collaborative home really across physicians, but reaching out to scientists and integrating efforts across many departments at UCLA and with outreach outside of UCLA. So I hope you hear more and more from us over time. It's a new program. It's part of the Institute for Precision Health, which is also reasonably new at UCLA. We try to build, particularly upon the expertise on campus in rare diseases in general. And I'm going to highlight a couple of programs that are part of the backbone of what we're trying to do in the California Center for Rare Diseases that have existed now for either 8 or about 15 years. But we support efforts within the Center for Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy within our enterprise for clinical exome sequencing, how we bring novel diagnostics forward within the Clinical Genomics Center, and how this integrates with the Undiagnosed Diseases Network, of which UCLA is a site, and then also pioneering work that was really established by David Ramoyne decades ago in building the Skeletal Dysplasia Registry, which has led to many, many rare disease insights, particularly in bone diseases. And then other clinics and programs, a clinic particularly focused around autism and autism spectrum disorders, and an immunology clinic that's very relevant to rare genetic diseases. So I'm going to first highlight, somebody's being asked to be admitted. So the Center for Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy is really my entry into the rare disease space. So much like others who've spoken from how each of us gets brought into the rare disease space, my own entry into this was in 2004 with the diagnosis of my son, my younger son, with Duchenne muscular dystrophy at the age of 3. And as a pediatrician, and actually I'm an oncologist by training, really forced and inflicted upon me an awareness of a relative lack of recognition of even a relatively common rare disease and the organization of care that's needed. So very much echoing what our last speaker just spoke about, and even for a relatively common rare disease. So it brought me into the rare disease space, particularly around Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We formed a component that's now an important component of what we're doing within the Rare Disease Center, which is the Center for Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, where we worked hard to build research enterprises and now have actually 13 labs at UCLA that focus on some component of Duchenne, build clinical care, and now have a team clinic with 8 different providers within it that is also now a leading clinical trial site in the world focused on Duchenne clinical trials. And we're in the fortunate position now, as is getting globally true across many rare diseases, that there are a number of FDA-approved therapeutics with insights for how do we move forward. And then, of course, critical to that is our mission at a UCLA is predominantly education. And so we integrate this with a lot of our residency and fellowship programs and graduate student and postdoctoral education as well. And we even have a course, which is an online course open to students at all 7 undergraduate campuses of the UC system, where people can take a course on a rare disease, which is Duchenne and related muscular dystrophies, and iteratively get a much deeper experience of how do we tackle something like this in a way that we hope to grow more researchers and get more people interested in biomedical science from the UC system. And then we, of course, reach out to advocacy on an ongoing basis, because that's absolutely critical ingredient of making progress. And I'm having a hard time advancing slides now. Yep, oh, very good. So another program that exists, and we created this at UCLA about 8 years ago, and this resonates across much in our rare disease world. Undiagnosed individuals with clearly likely genetic diseases don't establish and don't obtain an adequate genetic diagnosis. And so the Undiagnosed Disease Program at the NIH was expanded to multiple sites across the country, including one at Stanford and one at UCLA that are relevant for California. And we've worked hard to try to implement new novel diagnostic techniques that are relevant for finding mutations that are otherwise invisible through much of our current clinical practice. So pictured here are the other two PIs, Julian Martinez in the light blue shirt and Christina Palmer in the green shawl, and Nagme Durrani behind Christina. So these are critical individuals involved in this program to make diagnostic processes more robust. One of the things I'll just touch on here is we have a growing world of people. Many of us here speaking have actually come with a very clear genetic diagnosis, and that is not true for a very large portion of our community. And so we've implemented how we can better interpret whole genome sequencing by augmenting that with transcriptome or whole RNA sequencing analysis, and are working to try to bring this forward as a meaningful clinical diagnostic. And much like exome, it will not be covered by insurance. And we'll have to work to try to make that, that barrier broken, hopefully in the near rather than the further future, because we can clearly solve many individuals who are exome negative, who don't have a clear answer, who likely have a genetic disease, with not just whole genome sequencing, but whole genome sequencing and RNA sequencing, and integrating those two parts results in a much higher yield of identifying the causal mutation. At UCLA, we will be launching an international facing undiagnosed diseases clinic. So this is in the works at the moment. And through this effort, we hope to offer advanced diagnostics that we can't necessarily easily do within our typical clinical program. So this will be coming forward in the coming year or so. But the CCRD, the California Center for Rare Diseases, is intended to sit within other centers, within other efforts at UCLA, and augment and expand or leverage the expertise that exists within those programs, and try to serve as a clearinghouse and as a reference point at UCLA for making progress more quickly. So part of our goals within the California Center for Rare Diseases, this newer effort, is of course to improve care for those affected by rare diseases. And I completely agree with our last speaker about the family burden of doing this organization is just stunning. And I think we can do a lot to articulate and advocate for structures that are not really around CCS care clinics, which also fail to really coordinate the care, which is really falls on the burden. That burden often falls on parents. And imagine what that structure should be. So consider us academic supporters of such ideas and approaches. But and a lot of what we'll be doing is revealing fundamental biological principles of rare disease, outreach to our basic science colleagues, also in math and in computer science and in engineering as well, to try to bring novel insights and solutions forward. We partner with various industry partners to try to advance therapeutic candidates. And there's a growing and ongoing set of complex relationships with various pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies, both performing clinical trials at UCLA, but also performing some of the translational research. And I expect that to grow further to be a healthier part of how do we move candidates forward more efficiently. A key component which I would argue has been still underappreciated is we really have to expand our ability to perform clinical trials for rare diseases. Every rare disease, as we enter this clinical trial space, has to reinvent the wheel in terms of how do you do a clinical trial, what's it look like, what are your key endpoints, and that's a learning process for each individual trial. But also there's some diseases where we identified a novel disease in 2014, and the second person ever with that disease was just identified this last year. So there's really an ultra rare space as well. And then there's strategic individuals who with a specific mutation could benefit from an N of 1 strategy with tools that we already have. So exon skipping, which actually is approved with a couple of mutations in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, has opened the gateway for possibly doing N of 1 exon skipping sorts of trials with knowing the exact mutations and then moving those forward on individual patients. And that creates a very complex regulatory landscape and also cost structure for making those things work and move forward. So we have work to do in that regard in terms of what does our clinical trial landscape look like. The other goals of the California Center for Rare Diseases are reaching out to our various training programs and working with them to make training more powerful and more effective, and also including in a very real way rare diseases in a variety of different programs. And the recent launch of the genetic counseling program at UCLA is an example of that, so that we hope to be able to help in that educational program as we move forward. And of course, advocating for rare diseases and increasing sort of the discussion in this area is critically important. So thank you so much for inviting me here, Earl, and talk about the California Center for Rare Diseases. I'll just end by sharing.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Really appreciate it. And someone was asking about how to get in touch with the Undiagnosed Network. So I think the answer is you can email this email address, and then there's another link in the chat box as well. It's really exciting to see all the work at UCLA led by your team to invest and devote to the rare disease community. I like the Exome Sequencing Center in particular, because my day-to-day work is mostly involved with collaborating with Dr. Wendy Chang at Columbia and introducing sequencing into newborn screening, starting with DMD, but certainly not limited there. So thank you again for all the work.
Appreciate
it.
So Mike, I think you'll be introducing the next speaker.
Yes. While we have heard from families and our care providers, we want to also bring on the very important piece of industrial participation, because at the end of the day, we all need to have effective therapies to really cure the diseases that we're all facing. So glad to introduce Mr. Manny here from the California Life Sciences Association. Manny serves as the Senior Director of State Government Relations of CLSA. He's based in CLSA's Sacramento office and supports the organization's state advocacy priorities by cultivating strong relationships with various stakeholder groups, creating a robust grassroots program for CLSA members, and assisting with legislative policy, research, and more. Manny also assists in the development and implementation of direct legislative advocacy and educational efforts with members of the California legislature, government's office, and various state and local agencies. And thank you so much, Manny, for coming to the event, and please take it away.
No, thank you, Mike. Thank you for having us, and thank you for putting this important event together. Happy to be here and chat with so many wonderful advocates here. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Manny here, and I am the Senior Director of State Government Relations at California Life Sciences Association, shortly known as CLSA. We're a trade association that represents California's life sciences industry, and our mission is to advance California's life sciences ecosystem by advocating for effective national, state, and local public policies. We represent the entire ecosystem of life sciences industry, whether it's the pharmaceutical companies, firms in the medical device space. We have academic and research institute as our members, and we also have small and emerging startups as our members as well. Many of our member companies, they're dedicated to conduct rare disease research in the state of California. You may work closely with many of them, such as BioMarin, Ultragenyx, Vertex, Pfizer, Horizon Therapeutics, just to name a few. We have obviously a lot more than that. So, we partner with many of these companies, patient groups such as yours and NORD and others stakeholders to host educational briefings to educate policymakers. We just had a briefing, I want to say, I think it was last month, and Mike was actually one of our speakers who provided a patient perspective. So, Mike, thank you for that. So we know that there are about over 7,000 rare diseases that affect approximately 30 million Americans. And just to put it, give a snapshot, there are about 700 therapies aimed at those 7,000 rare diseases. So the industry is making great progress, but we also know that a lot more work needs to be done. So to the extent the industry has been spending a lot of money, billions of dollars each year to continue the research. One of the stats I found that in 2019, the industry spent nearly about $200 billion to fund the research. Now, a lot of that research, is private funding from the companies, some of them from NIH, and some of that actually comes from the state of California too, for the companies who are here. They come in the form of research and development tax credits. So many of you guys know, because last year, due to COVID, due to budget shortfalls, the state eliminated some of those funds, some of those research and tax credits that were available for our industry. Now that we know that the state will actually have a surplus, well, first they said, obviously, they were down 54 billion, but now that they're realizing that they're actually not, and they might be in a surplus, we think this is a good time for us to sort of go back to the state and ask to restore those tax credits. So we partner with Assemblywoman Katie Petrie-Norris out of Orange County to introduce the legislation. It's AB Assembly Bill 593 to restore those credits. We held a press conference yesterday in conjunction with Assemblywoman Katie Petrie-Norris, Assemblymember Kevin Mullen, Assemblymember Tom Daly, and Assemblywoman Jackie Urban. At that event, we also had Angela Ramirez. She's the president of CalRare. Many of you guys may know her. She spoke at length at that press conference and provided sort of patient perspective. What I'll do is I'll add some links in the chat for those who are interested in learning more. I think I have a link for the press conference as well. So we just want to make sure we continue to educate the legislators about importance in research and development. At the national level, some of you may already heard the term the Orphan Drug Act. The law was passed in 1983 to facilitate the development of orphan drugs. This law provided a much needed boost for the industry to continue its research. And just quick snapshot, before this act, I believe there were only 38 or 40 drugs that were approved to treat orphan drug diseases. And this number might be outdated actually, but I think ever since the passage of this law, we have now over about 770, so close to 800 orphan drugs approved. And for that, you can actually thank our wonderful advocates at NORD. They're the one who formed a coalition in the early 80s and called for change. It's their voice, your voice, the patient voice, which led to pass this landmark measure. And we think that we have to continue to work hand in hand with patient advocacy groups such as NORD and others, as well as the policymakers, to make sure we develop unique payment and reimbursement system that'll allow the patients to have access to these treatments. Speaking of policies, I know I'll switch my gears to some of the policy California Life Sciences is currently monitoring at the state level, because most of the time, what we hear things that the Congress is doing, right? Like the attention goes directly to Washington, D.C., but we tend to forget the policies that come out of the state legislatures. You guys heard earlier, Elise talked about the RDACs that are happening in every state. So California, especially because they think it's its own country, such a big economy driver, they lead in introducing new legislation, which usually spreads like a wildfire in other states, and sometimes even at the national level. Again, I don't know. I don't want to go too much into the RDACs because you heard a little bit about it from Elise earlier, and I think our next it might be actually Senator Susan Eggman and Jacob Fraker talking about it, but we are heavily involved in that legislation. It's in California, and this is not the first time it's being introduced. The CLSA actually sponsored this legislation, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. We did that with the help of NORD. It didn't go through that year. Last year it was introduced again. It didn't go through because some of the limitations they were placed on the legislators on how many bills they can actually move forward last year because of COVID. But again, it's here this year again. It's Senator Susan Eggman has introduced it again. It's Senate Bill 247 that'll establish the Rare Disease Advisory Council. So we're working very closely with Senator's office and other patient groups. We'll be supporting this measure and we'll be working closely with them and of course with NORD as well. One more bill I'll talk about that something may or may not be on your radar. It was a bill that was introduced last year by Senator Bradford. It would have given the Department of Healthcare authority to contract with the pharmaceutical companies using value-based purchasing agreements to handle the breakthrough medical advances for the rare diseases. So value-based contracts are designed to tie reimbursements to how a drug performs in the real world. It's measured in terms of patient outcomes and involves rebates, discounts, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, again, that bill was stalled last year because, like I said, legislators were asked to cut their bill loads due to COVID-19 being a priority. We're keeping a close eye on that bill. Should it be introduced again this year? So a few more bills we're following. Again, I want to respect everyone's time and I'll probably stop here. But what I'll do is I'll leave my email address in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can contact me directly. Lastly, I would just say, that patients, caregivers are the best advocates. And in my experience, nobody moves the needle better than you when it comes to legislation. So for us, it's very critical to work very closely with patient groups, caregivers, and other advocacy groups to continue the research, to innovate new approaches to life-threatening conditions. I think I'll stop there. If you have any questions, let me know. If not, like I said, I'm gonna leave my email in the chat. Shoot me an email, and if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Manny. Really appreciate your perspectives. I think it is an important piece from the pharmaceutical industry and the association representing them to, get the takes from the advocates, as you were saying, from the patient community, and then, really work as part of the community to move the whole field forward. And so we really appreciate that. And next, we are going to have our bill update, and I'm going to turn it to Siri Faith, our coalition leader, please.
Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Siri Vaith, Executive Director of CFRI and also the mother of a young adult living with cystic fibrosis. Before we move on, I really have to thank Christy and Katie for sharing your stories. I was so incredibly moved by your resilience and your strength. So I thank you very much. We're going to hear more about the bill from Jacob Fraker, and I have the honor of introducing him. Jacob was diagnosed with CF at birth, began his advocacy work at CFRI, I say proudly, after a state capital fellowship. While earning his MSW, he then was a legislative aide with then state assembly member Susan Eggman. And Susan Eggman is, of course, now a senator, and Jacob serves as her legislative coordinator for the LGBTQ caucus and is also staffing the RDAC bill. And so we are thrilled to have you share more, Jacob. Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you, Siri. It's great to be here. It's great to see all of you. Some of you look familiar from our past meetings. And so it's great to see you guys again and see you guys tracking on this bill. We are super excited about bringing this bill back. We had brought this bill back when Susan was in the Assembly, and we are just thrilled to be able to be in a position to bring it back again with her as a senator. Senator Eggman really appreciates all the work you guys are doing. She sincerely apologizes that she wasn't able to make today's meeting. She's just been very busy, but you know, I can tell you that we are both very excited about bringing this bill back and moving it forward. I got confirmation just the other day that this bill will be heard in Senate Health Committee on March 10th. So we are gearing up for that first initial meeting. We are excited, and we think it will do well in Senate Health Committee. And so I'm just really thankful to be working with such an amazing coalition with Siri and Nord and all the other members that we have, you know, moving forward. And we think we have a lot of momentum. We think we have, you know, certainly we have the justification. And so we are just excited to get this rolling. So I am here to answer any questions anybody may have about the bill moving forward. But like I said, it'll be heard in Senate Health Committee March 10th, which means for people submitting letters of support, you'll need to get those in by March 3rd by 3 p.m. So I know you can reach out to the coalition for some coordination on how to get those letters in. I believe the coalition is doing a larger sign-on letter. If you're interested, you know, like I said, please reach out to them. And if you have questions, comments, or concerns about the bill, you know, my inbox is always open. My phone is always in hand to talk with you and to listen to, you know, what are some of the thoughts you guys have about the bill in order to make this the, you know, the most effective, most efficient, most supportive RDAC in the nation. You know, we are very committed to that idea. The bill number for people, I'm sorry, I think I missed it, is SB 247. That's SB 24/7. So that is the bill. It's the Rare Disease Advisory and Ombudsman Bill. You can go look it up. You can just Google SB 247 California. The language should pop up. But if you're needing any kind of information around a fact sheet, or we have a sample letter of support with our office, you can reach out to myself and I can get that to you directly. Or I've also shared that with the coalition, and they have those materials as well if you'd like to reach out to them. So other than that, I'll pass it off to whoever's next. If there's any questions, I'm here and happy to answer. Otherwise, again, just a huge appreciation for all the work that not only the coalition has done, but everyone on this call has really put into this. And, you know, we are honored to be able to be the voice for some of those who aren't able to be here today. So thank you so much, and I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Jacob, very much. You did actually most of my work for me. That was great in terms of the next steps. But just to, you know, get on my soapbox, and of course this is preaching to the choir, but when you think about how large the state of California is, if you look at that 1 out of 10 people living with a rare disease, we're really talking about almost 4 million people living with rare disease in the state of California. So it's really critical, and we're so well poised this year. We have such a strong legislative advocate for us, better budget year, and this incredibly strong coalition. And, you know, we wish now, especially in light of COVID, all the things that have come up that have impacted people with rare diseases, it would have been wonderful to have an RDAC already in place. I mean, I'm just thinking of the most recent prioritization of vaccines, the list of 10 conditions for people who will be prioritized. You may notice has very few rare diseases on it. The reasoning being the CDC list is pulling off studies of people from disease groups with larger numbers. So this is an area where it would be wonderful to have this body advocating for us. So so moving on to the next steps, as Jacob said, the Senate Health Committee should be hearing this on March 10th. And you have to have letters of support in 1 week in advance, a 3 o'clock deadline, I hear. And so, yes, Jacob is correct. There will be a coalition sign-on letter for patient organizations. If you have signed up to be part of this coalition, you will be kept completely aware of the happenings and the ability and opportunity to sign on. So if you have not signed up yet to be part of the RDAC I see on the screen right now, there's the rarecalifornia.org. Mike, Elise, is that the best email for people to use, or is it the RDAC?
Well, I can go ahead and put even my personal email, and they're welcome to email me directly as well. That's fine.
Perfect.
I'll put that in the chat.
And, you know,
and definitely feel free to reach out to me. My email is there, mike.hu@rareaction.org. And Siri, I think we certainly could centralize the emails coming into one email box, but I'd be more than happy to monitor my box for any of those and direct it so that we can have a concerted effort.
And I shoot all of us in the coalition and the core starting group are happy to take any email related to this. We welcome everyone. This is our year, and it really will take all of us being active. So it's the letters of support. If you're in a patient organization, there'll be a sign-on letter. If you are an individual with a rare disease or somebody who cares about people with rare diseases, you can send letters to Senator Eggman's office. But it's also important to let your assembly members and senators in particular know your support for this. And if you do have the ability to seek co-authorships, I think that is still an issue, correct, Jacob? That if people's representatives want to serve as a co-author, that would be really important.
Yeah, absolutely. We are still definitely looking for co-authors. So yeah, I encourage you to reach out to your representatives. I know that the coalition has put together a list of some of our prioritized co-authors that you know, we're looking for, and definitely still looking for co-authors. So thank you for shouting that out, Siri.
So I'll put my email address in the chat box as well, but I think at this point I pass the baton back to Mike, or is it Elise? Somebody will jump in.
Yeah, I can jump in. Jacob, one more question for you from Peggy regarding the committee. And if I recall correctly, it will be the Health Committee, the Appropriations Committee, and what others?
Yeah, that's correct, Mike. So it'll start out in Senate Health Committee. That's chaired by Senator Dr. Pan. It will then go to Senate Appropriations. At that point, it will change houses and go to Assembly Health Committee, and then Assembly Appropriations before coming back to us. So those are kind of the two, Health and Appropriations, the two committees that we're targeting for co-authors. Certainly, as of right now, we do have Senator Laird as our co-author, which is absolutely wonderful. He's new to the Senate currently, but he is a longtime resident of the Capitol, and so we are thrilled to have him as a co-author.
Okay, sounds great. Well, as you can see in the chat box, there are a lot of email addresses thrown out. Again, feel free to reach out to any one of us if you or your organization is willing to help out and sign on to the coalition support letter. And in addition, your organization can send in your own as well. So I think they will be counted. If you have more questions, definitely feel free to leave in the chat box as well. Before we adjourn the meeting, I want to say, oh, we actually have a little bit of time. So I want to queue up Kristen for her help in getting the raffle results announced.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you all for speaking today. I'm going to share a little screenshot here of what you could win. I'm going to pull two names. And the only thing I ask is when I pull your names, if you can message me, I'll put my email. You can just email me your mailing address. Or you can private message me on the chat, whichever's easier for you. And I have one more screen. So this is the fun prize pack that you could win. And
oh, striped socks. Nice.
Yes, those are a hot commodity. And then I'm sorry, I have one more. I'm going to share the little spinning wheel that we've got right now. Everybody see the fun wheel? I put all your names in it, so it's fair and you're live. You can't accuse me of cheating.
Wait, including mine?
And Manny.
Oh, congratulations, Manny.
Oh, thank you. This is probably, it has to be the first time ever I won something. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
So great work at CLSA.
Just send me an email with your mailing address, Manny, if you can. And I'm going to pull one more because we have one other prize pack to pull. Stephanie?
Congratulations.
Is Stephanie still on? No? Okay. I will email her. I can look up her email. Oops. Well, thank you all. Rare Disease Day is February 28th. We have a closing video I'd like to share, but I would encourage you to visit Rare Disease Day .us and see how you can participate online on Rare Disease Day. We've got a lot of various activities and online things happening, and we're encouraging you to share your story and share your photos and wear your stripes all on social media. Just put some links in the chat, so please do that, and we'll close out with this video. It's a short, brief video, and then thank you again for attending today. I hope you enjoyed it.
Every year on the last day of February, the National Organization for Rare Disorders joins together with others around the world to raise awareness of the challenges faced by people living with rare diseases. Achieving health equity is even more difficult for rare patients. To have equity in health means everyone has an opportunity to be as healthy as possible, regardless of social, geographic, economic, or other obstacles that may be working against them. At NORD, we appreciate your support, which allows us to work on issues like health equity and many others, and for our staff and volunteers to bring them.
Oh. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what's happening here. Okay. All right. I'm happy to send this link if those of you would like to view the thank you video on your own. I'm not sure what's going on with it, but I'll just put this right into the.
If you'd like, I can play it real quick and share my screen for whoever wants to stay on.
Around the world to raise awareness of the challenges faced by people living with rare diseases. Achieving health equity is even more difficult for rare patients. To have equity in health means everyone has an opportunity to be as healthy as possible.
Hello?
Regardless of social, geographic, economic, or other obstacles that may be working against them. At NORD, we appreciate your support, which allows us to work on issues like health equity and many others, and for our staff and volunteers to bring them to the forefront on Rare Disease Day.
From the volunteer state ambassadors, we would like to say thank you to all of our Rare Action Network supporters for helping us connect with rare patients and families in our states.
And thank you for allowing the Rare Action Network to raise important issues with state lawmakers on Rare Disease Day and throughout the year.
Did you know that in medical school, I was told when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras? Well, what about the more than 25 million Americans living with a rare disease? At NORD, we are humbled to provide help and resources to our zebras and their caregivers.
NORD support allowed me to catch up on some overdue bills, including my rent. Thank you for your support, NORD, and thank you for supporting Rare Disease Day.
From all of us at NORD, thank you for your dedication to the rare disease community on Rare Disease Day and every day.
And with that, thank you all again for attending. We appreciate all your support and look forward to working with you, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Earl, that was a really good video.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. We'll see you in the next event.
Thank you.
And for those of you interested, UCLA, February 26th, their rare disease event. Just letting you know.